Good evening, everyone. Come on in, come on in. Happy Thursday, happy Thursday. Come on in the room. Come on in. We are live. We got a wonderful show for you tonight. Yay. Come on in, come on in. Say hello in the comments so I know you're there. I can shout you out if I can. Come on in. We got a fantastic show tonight on forgiveness and beyond. Okay, this is going to be a great show tonight. So I'm telling you, if you struggle with forgiveness, if you struggle with holding grudges, or if you think you've forgiven and you're good and you've moved past that, come on in. Come on in the room. Okay. Reach out, share it with people, especially with the folk that you know think they forgiven, but you know they really still mad. Send them the link, honey. Tell them to come on in the room. Come on in. Drop your name, say hello so I know you're there. I'm super duper excited, super duper excited. We are talking about forgiveness. We are talking about forgiveness. Come on in, come on in. Praise him, daughter. My sister's in the house. Show's in the house. Come on in. Let's talk about this topic that we hear enough about, that we've heard a lot about, but it still isn't always clear when you put it into practicalness. Hey, Keith, good evening. Come on in. Listen, I need y'all to share this live with folk you know still holding grudges since 1971. Okay? You need to tell them it's time to come on in the healing room of Tisa's Rants and Musings. Okay? Come on in. Drop your name in the comments. Say hello so I know you're here. I'm excited about our show. We have a special guest speaker that's going to help us talk about this topic. So, yes, yes, yes. I got 901. Hey, daughter. Shania's in the room. That's all right. Okay. This is good. I'm telling you, you guys would want to share this live. Share it with people who you know think they've forgiven. Share it with people you know who are struggling with forgiveness. Share it with people you know who claim they've gotten over stuff, but you know, you still a little like, why every time we mention that name, you pick up a knife, you know, that person, right? And I don't know, I forgive it. Oh no, I'm over it. Share on their page. Okay. Share it. Share it. We need to talk about what does this thing called forgiveness really mean? Who is it for? You know, who's doing it, who's not? We have a lot to talk about. My guest is here. She's in the studio. She is ready to get going. And I am happy to have her on board. All right. Oh, thank you, Kiwi. All right, Veronica. She said she already started early this week with forgiveness. Okay, she said we won't be friends, but she feels lighter. All right, we're gonna talk about it. We're gonna talk about it. What does forgiveness mean? All right, I got 903. I don't want to hold it up any longer because you know, once we start getting into this kind of topic, we're gonna have questions. It's gonna be juicy. And so, hey, brother in love. So we're gonna go ahead and get started with our episode on tonight. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Tisa's Rants and Musings. Yay! I am super duper 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 excited about tonight's episode because we are talking about forgiveness and then some. Okay, so I know you've heard a lot about forgiveness. You've heard a lot about how we got to forgive, especially if you've grown up in a Christian context or consider yourself a person of faith. You have heard about forgiveness, but it is, if we all tell the truth, one of those things that is really difficult to do. It doesn't always come easy. And sometimes we get stuck on our healing journey because we're struggling with understanding forgiveness, understanding what it looks like. And I thought, how better to bring in Independence Day, okay, than to talk about something that is preventing us from being free, right? Something that can get in the way of your independence, which is that freedom that comes from forgiveness. And we're going to talk about it. I have special guest tonight. Her name is Dr. Torise Hiller. She is a reverend. She is a professor. She's an author. She has multiple books. We will put up her website where you'll be able to reach out to her. Her ministry is all about reconciliation. And so I'm just excited that she has not thought it robbery to come into the Rants and Musing space with us to help us process this thing called forgiveness. And I mean it in practical ways, right? Not the churchy, turn the other cheek kind of stuff we've always heard. I'm talking about the real deal about forgiveness. What does it really look like? And how do we distinguish it from boundaries, right? So please help me welcome you guys, Dr. Torise Hiller.
Hello.
Hi, Dr. Torise. How are you?
I'm well. How are you?
I'm well. I feel like there might be a little delay with the internet, but we're going to, okay, my intercessors who are already on the line, y'all start praying it through, okay? So, but we'll work with it, hopefully to clear up. I don't know what it could be, but we're going to keep moving forward. Thank you so much
Thank
for
you for
coming on and being with us tonight. Help us. First, you can tell us a little bit about your ministry, but listen, help us get right in it, okay? This thing called forgiveness.
Yeah. Well, you can find me at aplacetoconsider.com. I can be reached at aplacetoconsider@gmail.com or toriseh@gmail.com. And you can hit me up on Facebook or on Instagram. But I'm just so delighted to be here on tonight. And I'm all about healing, self-discovery, and transformation. And much of that is about forgiveness. And not just forgiving the other person, but also forgiving ourselves. And so,
Okay, wait, before you get started, get in it. Okay, so help us understand when we're talking about forgiveness, what are we really, how would you even really define it? Because we've heard so many definitions. I have heard Oprah say forgiveness is letting go of wishing the past was any different than it could have ever been, right? In her Auntie O kind of way. But give us an understanding from your perspective, which is also a faith perspective, as to what do we mean when we say forgive and forgiveness?
yeah. Forgiveness is, as you said, it's been described in so many different contents, but I believe that we are ignoring the fact that the pain has happened. And so in the process of forgiveness, I think where we need to really start is not so much of what it looks like, but what it's not. And so forgiveness is not acknowledging the hurt. Forgiveness is not dismissing what happened. Forgiveness is not the fact that you're not human. Forgiveness is part of humanity, is part of the process. Why Jesus died, for the forgiveness of our sins. And so we really want to be honest about what forgiveness looks like. It's about the ability and the willingness and the wanting to repair a breach, a misunderstanding that has taken place within the soul within or without with other people. And so it's a willingness that has to happen.
Wow. It's a willingness, you're saying.
Yeah. Forgiveness is a choice. Even though God, it's a choice. You have to choose, and that takes a lot of courage, and it takes a lot of hard work. And so forgiveness is hard work, and it's hard work because you have to be patient. You've got to be prayerful, and you got to be persistent. And especially the question needs to really be asked on the journey before you even, first of all, you got to acknowledge, yes, as a Christian, our mandate is to forgive because the Father says, the commandment says that if we want to be forgiven, then we have to forgive others, right? So if we acknowledge that principle, that means it should be easy. No, it's not.
Right.
You're
Right.
also, yeah. So, but it's really not. Um,
So let
and
me
so,
ask you, because you've said a lot already, right? You said that it's a process, it's a choice, it's
yeah,
something that you have to be willing to do. But even in your willingness to do it, you
yeah,
got to be patient with yourself. You got
yeah,
to be prayerful about it. And you got to be persistent.
yeah,
So help me understand. It's something my mother always said. And she says that sometimes forgiveness is a daily act. It's something you have to do daily. So
yeah.
when you say that it's something you have to be persistent with, what is it that you mean? Persistent in how, in what way?
Well, what I mean is, first, when it involves in forgiving other people, so let's start there because that's a little bit easier than ourselves, and then later on you can bring me into ourselves.
Wait,
But when
wait, wait,
it
wait,
starts,
wait, Dr. Torise. Did you just say it's easier to forgive other people than it is to forgive ourselves?
most times, it depends
Wow.
on the person and the layer and the level of hurt. But most times, yes, ma'am, yes, ma'am,
Wow. Wow. Okay, go ahead. I just had to stop and acknowledge that point.
because it's easier to place the blame versus receiving the blame and taking ownership of it. And that's
Wow.
what I mean by
Okay.
that. It's easier to look without and focus on what they did and not realize what I did. And so the first thing you always want to know when you want to forgive another person, you have to ask yourself, is this relationship valuable and viable? And when you ask that question, then you know that it's worth the fight. But you must come to the understanding, first and foremost, is that there's nothing that cannot be forgiven and that there's no one that's undeserving of forgiveness. And so you've got to understand that first and foremost.
You said a lot that there's no one unworthy of forgiveness, and no, pretty much, I'm paraphrasing, no one who should be unforgivable.
Yes, ma'am.
Now, there's some things that have happened in some of our lives, and as a survivor of abuse, as a survivor, and so many women, especially Black women, who've been molested, who've been abused, who've been through domestic violence, who've been through so much hurt and pain and trauma
Yeah.
at the hands of people, and especially people who were charged to protect them, charged to care for them, charged to love them.
Yeah.
When you say that no one is beyond being forgivable, how do you get, and this is what I mean about making it practical, because it sounds great in theory,
Right.
right? But
Right.
how do you move from the understanding that, yes, I'm a Christian, I should forgive, but then understanding what this person has done?
Yeah.
And I'm talking about, it's even worse to me, and I'll just talk about me, when they're not remorseful,
Yeah.
right? When they're not remorseful, it's not even like they're sorry or taking accountability for their actions.
Yeah.
How do you move from the space of, theoretically, yes, I'm supposed to forgive you, to, I have forgiven you despite you being unapologetic or remorseful? Help
Yeah.
us bridge that gap.
It starts really honestly for words. Be willing to have a conversation. And you've got to give it language. And a lot of times we as taught, the problem is as Christians, we are conditioned or thought to believe that because Jesus is saved, that we just dismiss this whole practicality of being humanity, right? Because God is the divine. But we have to be able to give it language and we have to tell our story because when we tell the truth of what happened and we give it voice, each and every time we are reclaiming a part of our soul, a part of our body, a part of our heart, part of our lungs, a part of our organs that have been dismantled or disappointed or discouraged. And so you got to give it voice. Secrets breed sickness. And I'm all about, yes, we have to preserve our reputations, especially as women of God. But there comes a time where we have to tell the truth and tell it from the space of grace, not so much the place of pain. But in order to
Wow.
get to the place of grace, you've got to be in a safe space where you can shout it from the rooftops with the level of pain.
Wow. So part of forgiveness is, and moving into space of being able to forgive the unforgivable, is giving voice to the pain and to
Yeah.
what actually happened. And that
Yeah.
sounds a lot like when we had a couple of episodes back of just dealing with that unresolved trauma, right? Dealing with the pain, dealing with what actually happened. That once we start trying to process the trauma,
Yeah.
it gets us into a space where we can start now moving in healing, right? When you start, that's part of that healing process. So you said
You know why,
ask
Minister
yourself,
Lisa, you know why I say that is because when you are giving something language and you're giving it voice, you are actually feeling it. Because when you hold it hostage and you keep it silent, you're hostage to the hurt, and so are other people. And so when you give it voice, there's a level of freedom that comes, especially one, because you're giving it voice, and two, you're the one that's sharing your truth. And so when you share your truth, and you share what happened, it frees you to the point of understanding really what was happening in the happening. What was God doing in the happening? And that's where you get to that space from pain to grace and growing, because the more you give it voice, you get to feel it versus not feeling it and just surviving. When you talk about it, then you get to cope through it. And then that's when you thrive. We've been conditioned somehow, for some reason, to believe that we can't talk about it or we can't feel it, but it's only in feeling it that you get to heal. You cannot ignore that. And grief is a major part of forgiveness. You got to grieve the loss. You've got to lament. In order to let go, Tisa, you've got to lament. You can't let go without it.
I like that. You have to be able to lament, right? What happens. And Shalice is saying, and thank you for being on the show, Shalice, that it takes a safe space. And we need to create those spaces for one another without judgment. So it's interesting how all of what we've been talking about comes back to, again, kind of these same spaces that we've been talking about, where safety, where people can feel free to share and give voice to their pain, to their hurt without judgment, being able to process out what is happening. And Lakeisha said, well, hurt people. And we hear this all the time. But what I find interesting about this is that we tend to not think of that in ourselves.
Mm-hmm,
We
mm-hmm.
don't equate the hurt people to us. We
Absolutely.
see it as something external. So when we're thinking about forgiveness, oftentimes, and we've heard this before, we think that it's about forgiving the other person. And you said it's easier to forgive the other person oftentimes because it takes less work to forgive ourselves, because to forgive ourselves, we would have to own our part in it.
Absolutely.
Can you
Absolutely.
just talk more about what does that mean? So for something where you were victimized, right? There are women walking, and this, they're walking around in their 60s, 70s that never talked or processed the rape that happened to them as a youngster, the molestation that happened to them, never talked about the bad things or the traumatic things that have happened to them. And they've carried on with life as if it's nothing, but there's still a brokenness that's on the inside. They haven't been able to fully heal.
Yeah.
What role does forgiving ourselves play even in that?
In forgiving yourself, you are taking ownership of the responsibility or the role that you played. Now, there's always the space where, especially if it happened as a child or teenagers, or even when rape and molestation, that's where you are the victim. You are the victim. Forgiveness allows you to move from being the victim to becoming the victor and then into victory. And so what happens is when you are forgiving yourself, you're taking ownership of what the part that you played. And what I mean by that is as you grow, not talking about a 7-year-old or a 10-year-old or a 12-year-old, because that's not your fault. But what you have to do is you have to take ownership of giving people access to your soul. And so when we've opened up the door, when we have unfinished or unresolved hurt, and then we let other people in thinking that's going to solve the hurt, we've opened up a space and now we've created them access to our soul when our heart should have been guarded.
Wow. Wow. So then that leads me to the question about boundaries,
Yes.
right? Because again, if you're someone who, let's say you have been victimized, which has been so many women, right, in so many different forms, one of the issues of victimization is that your boundaries get blurred.
Yes.
You don't know what you don't know. You don't know how to create those boundaries, right? So help us understand the difference between forgiveness and boundaries. And let me just set up the context for why I'm asking that, because oftentimes people think that they've forgiven when they've cut everybody off. They think that that's just them creating boundaries. But then there are some people who believe that I got to go back to how we used to be if that meant I really, or I haven't really forgiven you. Like if we used to be best friends and we're no longer best friends, then I really haven't forgiven you. And neither is true,
Right.
right? So
Right.
help us understand what a healthy boundary is in the context of forgiveness.
Absolutely. And I love that you say that because there's a difference between boundaries and a boulder. Difference between
Wait, I like that. I like that.
you know, a boundary is when you put up a fence. Okay, you put up a fence. That's the boundary. Like you can't go past here. You can go here, but it can't go back there because reconciliation can't happen without moving towards something. You got to take a risk. So you got to set up that boundary. But the boulder is complete blockage where you let nobody in. And so if we're going to get, God gets the glory over our life. And that's what we always have to kind of keep in mind, that God is getting the glory by chains falling off of us because it doesn't serve anybody, not ourselves or not the other people, as long as we hold hostage to the hurt or hold them hostage to the hurt that they did. Because the truth is, we are not perfect, but the Lord is perfecting everything that's concerning us. But we've got to really recognize that, hey, you know what? If I tell the truth, Minister Tisa, if I tell the truth, 1,000%, there were some places in my life where I had to be forgiven.
Where you had to
Be forgiven. And I did some unlovable things. And when I recognize that, and that's where I take ownership over the parts that I played in life, not just with the immediate hurt, but the hurt that I've inflicted upon other people. And so when you recognize that, it makes the process of forgiveness just a little bit easier. Not perfect, but a little bit easier because there were times where you were jacked up, you were broken, and you hurt other folk. And now you're in a place where you need forgiveness and you want it. Not so much to absolve you, but so that God gets the glory and we demonstrate Christ. And that's the key.
wow. So the difference between, if I'm hearing you right, the difference between the boundary and the boulder is with the boundary, we still have access in a sense of I can still love you from a distance. We may not be able to be in relationship in the same way, but there's some abilities to love you from a distance where you can see me. I feel like the idea of defense is you can still see me. You can still see my heart has no ill will towards you. My
Right.
heart is free, and I no longer see you through the eyes of your offense. But that's why the boundary is there, so I don't have to worry about opening myself and or you up to us into this relationship where we're either hurting each other or that's not good for me.
Yeah.
But a boulder, then when I think of a boulder, then it kind of is like you can't see me. You just gotta. You don't know if I've forgiven you or not.
Right.
You know. you don't have access at all. Now, granted, there are some relationships that a boulder is
Right.
absolutely critical. Like if you're coming out of a domestic violence situation, a boulder is critical because
Absolutely.
the abuser will manipulate a fence. One thing an abuser knows how to do is cut through a fence. If you're in a domestic violence situation or an emotionally abusive relationship with anyone, you may
Absolutely.
need a boulder for some time to protect you until you're strong enough to go to a fence,
Yeah.
right? Or, and have that boundary. But oftentimes a boulder is necessary because they are just that manipulative and powerful. But
Yes, ma'am.
for the most part, I think I'm still struggling with, and I need you to help me because I'm still struggling with practically what does that look like though? Because this is what I've seen. I've seen people say, "Oh, I'm not holding no grudge. I'm not angry at her. I'm not angry at him." Um, but they're just toxic, and I can't be around them no more. I'm done with them. I'm not even going back. God, and it's always this disparaging view of the other,
Mm-hmm.
right? Which means for me, it feels like if I'm still looking at you in such a disparaging way, meaning I don't see no good in you. I
Yeah.
don't see no good in the relationship we used to have,
Yeah.
then have I really forgiven?
Well, you have to really consider that forgiveness is a process and there's many layers and levels to it. And it really depends on the level of offense that has happened. But you got to be able to surrender your part and God's part because He's the ultimate healer, you know? So what that looks like is practical steps is you've got to be able to acknowledge what has happened. You've got to be able to tell the truth of what happened, how it made you feel, and then also too, a big part of it too is to pray. One thing I found out on the road of forgiving other people, especially childhood hurts, I had to recognize that my parents did the very best that they could do. So you have to understand that part, first of all. Second of all, you've got to pray and say, Father, forgive them for they know not what they do. And it doesn't mean they don't know what they've done, but they don't have no idea to the level of what it caused. And that's the reality of it. People know they've hurt you, but I don't think they really understand the entire level of that wound or that cut or that hurt or how deep it is. And so when we are telling our stories, we have to, you know, condition our souls to be able to receive whatever's coming up. Because some stuff is unexpected that will come up. Some stuff you thought was there, and some stuff that you don't even know is there is going to come up, and you've got to be able to unpack that thing as our sister said, in a safe, supported environment. And that's important. That's important. And so practicality is really, honestly, Miss Tisa, there's no right or wrong. You just got to put your seed in the ground, wait, and watch it grow. And whether that's saying forgive me, whether that's saying picking up the phone, it says I love you, or texting them, or whether that's even silence and praying from afar. Whatever that looks like. I can't say that for every person because everyone is at a different stage of forgiveness.
Right.
There's different levels and layers of hurt. I can speak from this side of it, but I can tell you 5 years ago or 10 years ago or even 2 years ago, I wasn't here.
And that's that journey. That's that healing journey.
Yeah.
That's that healing journey. And sometimes, and I like what you're saying about it depends on the level of offense. And I find it also depends on the offender,
Yes.
right? So sometimes it's easier to forgive people who you don't, you know,
Yeah.
you weren't that close to anyway. So the stakes weren't that high.
Yeah.
So um, it's a little easier. But when it's someone that you've loved and someone that you, like I said, was supposed to protect you or something like that, it
Yeah.
can become way more
Yeah.
difficult. And to give ourselves grace for the process.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
I love that you brought it up with grace and you're adding it with prayer because when you put the prayer piece to it,
Yes.
um, oh, and I know what you said. You said also that we have to ask and say, God forgive them, for they know not what they do. What I love about that is it's a prayer for God to forgive them before we even pray for our own ability to forgive them.
Absolutely.
When we put them in God's hands,
Absolutely.
that begins to also help break up, the ground of our heart to be able to
Yeah.
then offer up forgiveness in a different way.
Mhm.
So help me now. I think
Yes,
I
Lord.
forgive it, right?
Mhm.
I think I
Mhm.
forgive it, but I feel like um, I keep getting disappointed,
Mhm.
and this is something that I've had this experience that I've forgiven. Anybody knows me know I never really hold grudges because my memory too bad, girl. I can't hold no grudge. I never remember no way. Okay, I'd be like, oh, I wasn't speaking to her. It's too much work. So I never. Okay, I was that girlfriend in high school. They'd be like, we're not talking to her, and I'd be like, okay. And next day, hey, and like we told you we're not talking to her. Oh my God, like
That's a great gift. That's a great gift. That's a great gift, girl.
I can't hold grudges. It's too hard for me, right? But what I did find that after I thought I released it,
Yeah.
after I thought I forgiven, I
Yeah.
realized I hadn't released them, that I
Yes.
kept getting disappointed. So
Yeah.
talk to us about this is the beyond forgiveness. This is what I meant when I tagged this forgiveness and beyond, because so many of us will say, I've forgiven, I'm good, I'm no longer, but then there's still a level of expectation
Yeah.
that we hold for them. Tell us
Yes.
about what it means to release.
All right. So when you are releasing them, you are releasing yourself, and then God releases you into full access to what He wants. The Bible says, "No good thing shall be withheld from those that walk upright, blameless." So when you're the victim, you find fault. But when you're walking in the victor and the victory, you're no longer contributing to the fault or continuously finding the fault. And so you got to relinquish the responsibility to be in control or to be controlled. And that
Wait. We got to be willing to relinquish.
yeah,
Say it again. Say it again.
relinquish the responsibility to be in control or to be controlled any longer.
I'm trying to write it for y'all. Relinquish the responsibility to be in control
Yeah.
and be controlled.
Yes. Because anytime that you are operating in unforgiveness, you're a slave to sin. And it shows up in the fear when we don't pick up the phone or when we don't, do those things. It's a lack of fear, it's a lack of trust, it's all those things. And so, how you know that you truly have gotten through it? This is the one thing I've learned too. So you got to track, pace yourself to peace and be able to kind of track the tension, because how you know that you've really forgiven is when your response has changed. You know how like kind of when you were in love with that boo or who or whatever that is, right? And you thought you were over them, and the minute you saw them, now your stomach jumps or your gut is just changing. How you know that you've forgiven is when your response has changed, and you don't show up with people with the level of responsibility. You show up being fully availability. So that's the difference when
Wow.
you're showing up out of availability versus responsibility. And that's when you know that you have truly grown and God has done some miraculous work, because it's like, oh, I'm available. I'm here. I'm fully present. I'm not just showing up because that's my duty, but this is God's delight.
Wow. I love what you're saying. That when you show up not out of responsibility, but availability. And to me, that's the difference between the fence and the boulder,
Yeah,
right? The boulder is, I showed up because this is my obligation to show up, but
right.
I'm not really present because I got this boulder traveling with me. And
Yes.
so the wall is up, but when I'm forgiven, I'm able to be available,
Yeah.
even if I have a fence up, for you to still see and engage my heart, right?
Yeah.
Even if we can't engage in the same way, even if we may not talk to each other every day like we used to,
Right.
even if things can't be the same, you can still see and engage my heart.
Yeah.
Wow, I like that. That's really good. Um, as if and when and you help me with this, when I think of release,
Mm-hmm.
I think of it as a letting go, right? A letting go, but also a letting go, not just of the hurt, not just of the fear, like you talked about that fear, operating in fear, because
Yeah.
perfect love casts out fear, right? So I mean, there's so many layers, like you said, because even the unforgiveness impacts our ability to love as Christ calls us, right?
Yes.
Because it creates this level of fear in us that we then carry out to so many other relationships. So if
Yeah.
I've been hurt by this woman over
Yep.
here, then I'm going to say I don't trust women at all.
At
If
all.
I've been hurt by this man, I don't trust men, right? If I've been hurt by this pastor, that's why I don't go to church no more.
Right.
Okay, if I've been hurt by the deacon, that's why I don't go to church. So we tend to take the
Yeah.
offenses that may have been one on one, and we apply that lens of hurt to everyone around it, right? And it becomes this bigger
Yeah.
thing. It impacts our ability to love. But
Yeah.
when we forgive,
Yeah.
we let it go, you said.
Yeah.
We then have to release it,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
But release it also means not having the expectation that you will change and eventually be who I think you should be.
Absolutely. You said
How
something that's so powerful, Minister Tisa. Man, I'm just so grateful just for what you're doing because you're helping people get to the place where they need to be and to fully have access to everything that God wants. Because God is waiting to drop stuff on us, but our character must support the weight. And a lot of the holdup is this wall of forgiveness or unforgiveness, I should say. But you have to really, for me, I'll say this from my experience. When I begin to truly track stuff, especially when we go into the church space, which will probably be a part two, um, when you go into that space, when you're taking it from one place to the other, you've got to be able to track and trace that the offense did not start there. So if you're hurt in church, I recognize you track and trace that the wound did not start there. It started a long time ago with somebody else. The issue becomes in the church or in a relationship or whatever else is that the person has triggered the wound.
wow.
Now, the wall that was already up now becomes a big old, a massive boulder. Like, there was a boulder in that
Wow.
place, and now there's the boulder. That's where it becomes the boulder. There was already a fence. That's just human nature.
I hope you guys are sharing this. I hope you guys are sharing this. It connects to what we were talking about with trauma,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah,
So if you've already had trauma in your lives and you're walking around with this lens, because we all have lenses to which we see and interpret the world around us.
yeah,
If we have a lens on that it has been colored by our trauma and that trauma hasn't been processed and resolved, then
right.
oftentimes we walk into that space from jump
Yes,
with this spirit and this lens of a viewpoint. So then before we know it, it's almost like self-fulfilling prophecy. Every interaction shows up as a trigger to that trauma or to whatever wound that hasn't been healed in us. And
yeah,
so that, to me, one of the biggest reasons why church hurt feels so much worse than anything else
right, right.
is because we talked about this on a previous show that we consider the church to be like this refuge, this safe haven all the time, this utopia when church really is a hospital with people coming in with varying degrees of brokenness,
Yeah,
hopefully looking to be healed, right? So we come into that space with our wounds and our injuries, and so things that tend to happen, we're still seeing it through the lens of that woundedness.
yeah,
I'm sorry that I just had to process that out, right? And so part of the forgiveness you're telling us is to track and trace the wound. So
Yeah.
I'm assuming when you say track and trace the wound,
Yeah.
yeah, you're saying ask yourself some questions. What are
Yeah.
some of the questions we would have to ask ourselves?
You would have to ask yourself, why. So, say a simple thing. Let's start off with simple. You're feeling rejected. You have to ask yourself, well, why do I feel rejected? Where is rejection coming from? Is it coming from a spirit of abandonment that happened whether you were adopted or almost aborted, or even the simple thing of in your mother's womb? You grew up in a great house, but in your mother's womb, she thought she wanted a girl and you turned out to be a boy. That's something so simple, and now you go through life, we're feeling unwanted and feeling abandoned, and we're
Wow.
rejection. So there's other spirits attached to the main tree. There's other branches attached to it. And so you got to be willing to ask yourself some hard questions, sit with God. And that's where like time with God is so important, I know we want to avoid the spirituality of it, but forgiveness is so spiritual. You got to be able to sit still with yourself, ask those hard questions, and let God wait for Him to drop it on you. Yeah.
And
Ask
that's
hard
again where
questions.
that patient and persistence comes in, right?
Yes.
And giving yourself grace
Yeah.
because it's a vulnerable space to be in,
Mhm.
to really be able to sit back. Veronica said, ouch, my toes. To be able to sit back. I know, Veronica, all our toes, my feet over here hurt, and I literally rubbing them as we speak. I'm like, okay, wait. So, but to really sit and ask God to help
Yeah.
me trace back this woundedness. Help me. Is
Yeah.
this me? Right? Being courageous enough.
Absolutely.
Ask God to show me.
Yes. You said it. You said it, Minister T.
Show me. Right? And I promise you, anytime I have done that, He will show you the
Yes.
good, the bad, the
Yes.
ugly, the beautiful. He will show you in all of your glory
Absolutely.
and in all of your mess. And
Yes.
it's not always easy to take.
No.
But that's where that forgiving ourselves.
Yes.
So help me, because that's probably been one of the hardest things for me. And
Yeah.
I remember being in, um, a healing space,
Hmm.
and the person who was directing that space told me to say, I forgive myself for being molested.
Hmm.
And I was angry.
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
was like, first of all, I was a child. What you mean? This is ridiculous. What kind of person? Like I was a child. I was innocent. There was no such thing. And he said, but the 7-year-old you don't know that.
Right.
So the little girl that was still living inside of me, who
Absolutely.
was still was running my life,
Right.
engaging it, like I'm still looking through at the world through her eyes,
Right.
that adults, especially church people, are harmful, will hurt you, and have no problem shouting and acting like nothing, right? That's the eyes that I was still looking through.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I was still looking through these 7-year-old eyes, and he told me to tell that 7-year-old, have that 7-year-old say, I forgive you. And when I tell you, by the third time I said it, I was I would give myself I was totally 7, 8
Yeah.
again.
Yeah.
But it freed me because I
Absolutely.
didn't realize I was holding myself accountable for the
Yeah.
harm. Because
Yeah.
in a child's mind, they always think it's their fault.
Right. Right.
Oh, Jesus!
Right.
We don't
Right.
realize that when we're victimized as children, we carry with us this victimization that's in our subconscious. That happened to me because I'm bad. I'm different than that one because it didn't happen to her.
Yeah.
And so I had to tell that little girl to forgive herself because she didn't know it wasn't her fault.
Yes. Dr. Rob Reamer says it's in a book called Soul Care, which I believe everyone should read. But he says that I may
Say it
have
again.
called Dr. Rob Reamer. It's called soul care. And
Yeah.
so in the process of that, he says this powerful statement that I may have been victimized, but I am no longer a victim.
Hallelujah.
And so you were victimized, but you are not a victim because you're free. As you said, when you give yourself permission to release yourself. And then also, too, you have to place the blame where it belongs. And that's
Right.
a fact. That's just a fact. The blame was my uncle or my whoever committed the offense. That's where the blame belongs, not with the spirit of indictment, but just stating the facts. And so we have to recognize there's a difference between indictment and just stating the reality of life, the proclivities, the frailties, which
Wow.
brings us to accountability, making us available, and then also reconciliation, which is the mandate in relationship 101. You've got to be willing to want to be built, or else you're going to walk around an island. And how do you walk in full abundant living? You just can't. You're just walking around with a chain just tied to you. And God,
God,
when you rec-
baggage.
when you
Like Erica Badu said, oh, you got all your bags, right?
yeah,
We're just walking around with heavy baggage. And I know for a fact
yeah,
that unforgiveness shows up in our physiology
my God,
when we are carrying around the
my
shame,
God,
the guilt of our past histories, things that we are blaming ourselves for because we weren't able to ever put the blame where it belonged because we weren't allowed to,
right,
right? We were conditioned to say it was our fault,
yes,
carrying that all around, that the minute things don't go right, we blame ourselves.
yes,
That shows up then in our stress, in our overeating, in
yes,
our emotional eating, right? It
yes,
shows up in our bodies, and we got heart disease, we got
yes,
diabetes, we got hypertension, we
yes,
got all these ailments.
yes,
That's not just because of food,
right,
but it's
absolutely,
because we've been carrying around the weight of
yes,
unforgiveness
yes,
more for ourselves than
mm-hmm.
even for others.
Yeah.
But God, to God be the glory. There is healing.
Glory after this. There's so much glory.
Oh,
And
God.
the good news is the word says that after you have suffered for a little while, that I will support, I will strengthen, I will reestablish, I'll put you on a firm foundation. And so the
Yeah.
prerequisite to joy or glory is suffering. But there's joy even in the suffering when we recognize that the good news is, and really honestly, ministry nowadays, especially for you and I and other people, have been built on the backs of adversity. But this is the season where God allows us to be easier through the act of forgiveness. Doesn't mean you forget, but God throws it in the sea of forgetfulness. So we've got to let it go.
And you know what I realized? Because people say, I forgive, but I won't forget.
Yeah,
What I do realize, because I've experienced it, that when you've truly forgiven, you don't
right,
have to worry about forgetting.
right,
It automatically happens. Like
absolutely,
it's not even in my mind. When I see that person, I don't see
right,
what they did 10
yeah,
years ago. Like
right,
I don't see what they did, the when I have honestly forgiven. I'm not even thinking about it.
yes,
And so that's one of the ways I've gauged, have I truly forgiven, is
yeah,
when I see that person, does my body and my mind and my emotions
right,
respond and take me back to the point of the offense?
and
If
that's
I
the difference.
immediately
Yeah,
translated back to that point,
yep,
then I'm still processing that thing, which again, it's a process, it's a journey. But I think we're so conditioned to want to say we've forgiven because we're so, as Christians, we got to forgive. We want to say we've done it, but sometimes we just haven't. Sometimes it's a daily thing until it actually gets there, right? And to give ourselves that patience you talked about and that persistence. Well,
yeah,
I'm not going to stop trying to be healed. And since I'm not going to stop trying to be healed, I'm not going to give up forgiving the people I'm struggling with,
You got to be able to say that too. And this is where too, I love how you say healing is the only agenda. And so you got to give yourself permission to acknowledge it, to admit it, and then to be aware. And self-awareness is so important to be able to say, hey, I'm not ready. I'm not ready. Or how about this? I am still struggling. I want to, but I'm still struggling. And you confess that to the Lord. Or if it's someone you're in covenant with and they're valuable and viable relationships, you express that. And like I said, they have to put the seed in the ground. You've got to wait and watch it grow. And if the person is trying to be trusted again, they're trying to enter back into access of your heart, then they've got to be willing to do the work. And you've got to be willing to receive it and let them. And so you're not fully forgiven when you want to work towards rebuilding, but you just keep it clean. You've got to slowly open the door and let love in, because that's what God wants for us to have, love and life. And so, but you got to be able to say, I'm not ready, because it takes time. It takes time, and that's a process.
And that's the grace of God that when we stay engaged with the process.
Yeah.
Now, there are some people who say it takes time and it's been 35 years, right? And not that we want to put time frames on people and their healing process, but the truth is, if you stayed engaged with the process, it doesn't have to take that long. That's a whole lifetime, right? Yeah. So it doesn't have to take 10 years. It doesn't have to take, after my divorce, I was like, Lord, I need a suddenly work, right? I need to suddenly, I need to be on the express for this healing journey, because I don't want to block my next.
Absolutely.
Right? I don't want to block what you may have for me, because I'm so bogged down in unforgiveness. Yeah. And that's not to say it's still not a journey and it's not a process.
Right.
What I am saying, though, is my intentions is not to still be in the same space of hurt and woundedness that I was in when it first happened. That I got to be on this healing journey.
You've got to be committed, Minister Tisa. You got to be committed to the crown, not the cross. You got to be committed to the crown, not the cross. And a lot of times, yes, there is no crown without the cross, but you can't stay there. So you've got to be able to sit with it for a second, not a century, not a lifetime, And so a lot of times when it comes up, a lot of us get stuck there. But you can't stay in the story. You got to move to the glory of God.
Yes.
Stay in the story. And so that's why you tell the story, but you can't stay there, because in revealing the truth, God is going to reveal the whole truth and nothing but the truth. The whole truth of what happened, but what God was doing in the happening and his truth behind it. And that's really what it is, his truth behind it, because God was doing a great work in it. Even in it.
That's so hard to sometimes wrap our heads around. And I tell everybody that sometimes we forget about the mystery of God. We think we know him through and through, that there's still there's some ways that he still knows how to show up and surprise us, right? And sometimes we're surprised by what he was even doing in the midst of us moving from the space of victim to victor, right? So I love the fact that there will be glory after this, but there has to be an after this. If you're stuck in the story, which is what I'm hearing you say, you don't get to the after this.
Right.
So we end up, Reverend Torise, this is what I've noticed, that we end up bitter and not better.
Yes,
we end up resentful.
Yeah.
Versus restored, right? We end up in these spaces where we are on the face of healing and forgiveness. But really, deep down, we're still closed off. We're bitter about what happened, and we haven't been able to allow God to really heal and restore us.
Yeah.
And so that's where we got to get to. where it's no more facades.
Mm-hmm.
This is where I'm at, Lord. But
Yes.
I truly want to be healed
Yes. And
and
hope.
part of that heal and made whole.
Yeah.
And part of that process
Yeah.
is to forgive others
Mm-hmm.
as well as myself.
Yeah. And part of being whole, Minister Tisa, is entering back into those valuable and vital relationships. That's part of being made whole. Because forgiveness is a gift, okay? It's a gift. But see, the problem with forgiveness and how we ease into unforgiveness is when we have these levels of attachments and these chains, attached to the gift. And so Christmas time and birthday time, when people are giving you a gift, you are just so excited about opening up what's inside. And so we have to understand that forgiveness is a gift, but we have to allow ourselves to be open to the possibilities of what's going to unfold in us or even in the other person. And so just as much courage it says to let go, I release you and I'm done. And it's okay. This was my mistake. I let you in too quickly, or whatever the case is. So there's levels to that, but then it's also too, people don't realize the gift in becoming whole is being able to see the glory of God on both of your lives when you make the steps, take the risk, because love is a chance. Love is always willing to give people a chance. Now, I didn't say just go like, man, we homies again, but you got to give people a chance. And as you say, grace to really grow, because there's a difference between that innocent love, that 7-year-old little love, and there's a difference between mature love. And mature love is always willing to take a risk.
Wow. And it makes me think of the scripture of, again, of that perfect love cast off fear, but also that love covers a multitude of fault, right? And
Absolutely.
sometimes when we've forgiven, so just so we can go back over it, when we've forgiven people,
Yes,
that
ma'am.
says, I release you from the harm and the hurt that you caused me,
Yeah.
right? But then when we really release them, we go beyond forgiveness and we say, I accept you for who you are,
Yes.
and I will love you, flaws and all. That
Yeah.
means I release you from the expectation of being anybody different than someone who could have wounded me the way that they have. I
Absolutely.
don't have to judge you anymore. That's just where the space that you're in right now. I will pray for you to be healed and restored, but I'm still going to love you for who you are.
Right.
But because I know that you're not in that space yet, I
Mhm.
have to have a boundary between us.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I love you, but because I love you, I
Yeah.
can't engage with you in that same way.
Right.
So there's a boundary I may need to set up, but
Yeah.
that doesn't stop me from loving you
Absolutely.
and being able to have forgiven you. I'm
Yeah.
not expecting you to change. I'm not still mad that you still
Yeah.
being that same person you was. She was alive 2 years ago. She's still alive. Yes, because that's where she is right now. And I'm praying for her deliverance, but I still love her.
Yeah.
Just like God still loved me in my mess and still loves me. Right?
Yeah.
So that's it. That seems to be the trajectory that you set up for us. But guess what, guys? There will be a part two.
Yeah. You know
Reverend
why?
Therese is willing to come back and to take us from forgiveness, release, boundaries to reconciliation. We're going to talk about reconciliation next week because
Mhm.
that's a whole nother level
Absolutely.
of courage, of love,
Yes.
being able to reconcile with people who have hurt and harmed you. For
Yeah.
some of us, it already seems like impossible. We think boundaries are meant to be lifetime boundaries, right? We think the boundary, that fence is going to be there till I die, right? We don't think reconciliation is possible,
Right. It
but
is.
it really is possible.
It
But
is.
we have to challenge what we think it looks like, and we have to challenge what it's going to cost us, right?
You said it. You said it.
Dr. Therese, thank you so much.
Said it.
People want to know if you can repeat the author's name of the book Soul Care again.
Yes, Dr. Rob Reimer. Reimer. Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
It's a
Let me
test.
write it down. Let me get it one more time. You said Dr.
Rob Reamer, and it's a course that I
Reinnner?
Reimer.
MER?
Reimer. Yeah. It's a course that I'm, my pastor introduced me to, and now I walk other women through that process. And so it's something every woman, every leader, every individual on the face of the earth needs to have soul care, because that's really where the breach has happened in our soul. And that leads to part two. The breach has happened in our soul.
Wow. Wow. There's so much I can say about that. You have no idea. But thank you again,
Yeah.
you guys. Thank you. If you guys have questions, feel free. Most of you are connected to me. You can inbox me any questions you want to set up for next week, because Dr. Torise is coming back, and we're going to talk about this thing called reconciliation, how to do it, what it looks like, and to God be the glory.
Yes.
Healing is available to us.
Yes.
Forgiveness is available to us,
Yes.
and I am so grateful for it. Thank you guys for joining me. Remember, you can connect with Dr. Torise at aplacetoconsider.com.
Yes.
And you can also, if you have people you want to share this with, please share it. We got to be healed. We can't afford it, right? We can't afford the underlying ailments that unforgiveness causes us, that bitterness that gets into our spirit, that
Right.
then gives us so much pain in our bodies physically. Connect with me at tjnanceministries.com and have a wonderful night. I'll see you all next week.
Yes.